we call it custom research. That is where we are different from the syndicated research providers like the data monitors of the world, where we provide custom research services or custom intelligence to solve your particular business problems.
That is Nitin Rohatgi, who is the co-founder of Enroute Consulting, a research firm based in India. Nitin's firm supports independent consultants around the world, many of them McKinsey alums, and I'm very impressed by the quality of his firm's work. With about 20 employees, his firm typically will pull together background research using secondary sources, as well as 10 or so proprietary data sources that they subscribe to. They have deep expertise in the approach used by top consulting firms. You can learn more about Enroute on their website. That's Enroute LLP. That's ENROUTELLP.com. And there's a link in the show notes. If you visit the website for our show at umbrex.com/unleashed, you can sign up to receive the free weekly Unleashed email, which includes the transcript of every episode, consulting tips, and book recommendations. Thanks for listening. Hello, Nitin. It's great to have you on the show.
Hi, Will. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So I'm really, really psyched, Nitin, that we finally get a chance to sit down together. We're here in New York City together on one of your trips to the U.S. To hear about your firm Enroute. I've been really, really impressed by the quality of work product that your firm does, and it's a great resource for independent professionals who need some support. I've had multiple Umbrex members tell me that you guys do great work. So looking forward to it. Tell me a little bit about Enroute and how you started the firm.
Sure. So thanks, Will. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. And as far as Enroute is concerned, okay. So the journey started in 2015. It's been 3 years, 3 successful years, I must say. And Enroute branched off from ex-McKinsey Piper Research team, where the co-founders of Enroute, that is myself and my colleague Karthik, we spent about more than a decade providing business research and intelligence and analytics services to global corporates and professional services firms. And then in 2010, we started thinking that, hey, we must do something ourselves. We must do something of our own. And it took us a while, a couple of more years. Finally, in 2015, we took the plunge and founded Enroute with similar ethos of providing high-quality business intelligence and research services to global professional services firms and corporates.
Great. So McKinsey has a knowledge center, McKinsey Knowledge Center in India that serves McKinsey consultants whenever they have some question, they want to, just some basic research done, they'll send it to that group. And my understanding is the founder of that group started a firm where you worked and you got trained. And then, so you sort of have that McKinsey kind of DNA that you brought to Enroute. So
absolutely. So myself, my colleague Karthik, and all the analysts in our team, the senior analysts, all of us have similar McKinsey DNA. So McKinsey/Piper DNA, if I may call it that. And the global head of research services at McKinsey, along with a couple of colleagues at McKinsey who were McKinsey consultants, they founded this firm back in early 2000. And then we all were trained in similar formats and templates and frameworks that McKinsey consultants worldwide use today in their work.
Fantastic. And what I hope to do in the show today is talk, number one, we can kind of quickly go through your different engagement models of how you work with consultants. And then we can do a kind of high-level overview of the types of services you provide. And then I think we're going to do a deep dive just to give an example on one type of, how do you, identify targets for, for either an acquisition or for partnership, right? Before we jump into all that, it's my understanding is you primarily, or one of your main sources of clients around the world is independent consultants. Is that right? So tell us about that a little bit.
Sure. So as I said, professional services firms, and when I say professional services firms, we sort of divide it into 2 categories largely. One would be these consultants. So these would be independent consultants, boutique consultancies, the smaller consulting firms. They could be strategy consulting firms. They could be sales and marketing consulting firms. They could be innovation consultancies that we work with. And then the other group is the law firms or the legal advisory firms. So those are the two sweet spots for us. And largely these independent consultants and smaller consultancies utilize our services maximum.
Yeah, and I never even thought of a law firm as being as a potential client. What are the kind of things that law firms need research help on?
Sure. So primarily where law firms use our kind of services is in their business development support. So when a typical partner or a senior partner at a law firm, a corporate lawyer, for example, goes out and pitches to a large corporate for deal activity or for their role in deal activity for the corporate, they would just, shout back to us saying that, hey, I'm going to pitch to XYZ next week. Why don't you give me a complete blow up on the company, the person I'm meeting, and the kind of deals they have done in the past 3 years. All deals, including privately held ones, including smaller privately held companies that they have acquired in the last 3 years. And we turn it around on as quickly as a 24-hour basis for them.
Wow, that's amazing. Now let's go through your different engagement models. So I think there's a few different ways that people can engage your firm. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So broadly, 3 engagement models. The first one is the ad hoc project model, where you say that, hey, I'm looking at analyzing this particular industry or sector. Could you give me a deep dive on this sector and tell me all the nuances of the sector, the trends, the competitive landscape, who's who in the sector, what are the future opportunities, what's the analyst opinion about the sector, etc. And we produce this deep dive sector report for you. That would be a typical one-time ad hoc project engagement. The second engagement model is a short-term retainer, which could typically be quantified 1/3/6 month kind of an arrangement where the client defines that, hey, I would need these many analyst days or hours of work over the next 30, 60, 90 days, and you quote me a price accordingly. So this engagement model would typically be slightly more discounted than the ad hoc project model. The third the engagement model is the FTE or the full-term equivalent retainer model, which is a minimum of an annual contract. So it could be anywhere between 1/3/2/3 years. And that's a dedicated analyst team for the client doing their entire research work, solely dedicated to that particular client.
Beyond just the public resources on the internet, what types of research services do you subscribe to be able to get additional information for your clients?
Sure. So that's a good question. So most of our analyst team, they are adept in culling out information from more than 150 information sources. These could be proprietary, paid information sources, some expert, very, very niche and specific information sources, which are provided to us either by the client. Some of the generic ones are the ones that we subscribe to, stuff like LexisNexis, Factiva, DNB, Hoover's, Avention, etc. And there could be some specific ones like a Thomson fact set that we would use for a law firm, for example, in which there could be these tripartite agreements that we have with the database provider, the client, and our team who is dedicatedly using that database for this particular client. So the analysts are using these plethora of information sources in their daily work, churning out deliverables for clients.
Great. Let's talk about, at a high level, go around, I'm looking at a page with you of the different high-level services you provide. So I'll just read them out and then we can go through them. So we have number 1, industry analysis. Number 2, economic research. Number 3, competitive intelligence. Number 4, key account management. Number 5, formatting or graphic presentation support, PowerPoint. Was that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Quantitative analysis, and 7, strategy support. So maybe we can quickly go through each one of these and you can give us some example of what would be an example project in that space. So industry analysis, what would that be? Can you give a sanitized example?
Sure. So industry analysis is something, a specific area which the client wants us to sort of explore and take a deep dive into. So, for example, and this could be very, very niche. For example, recently we did an analysis on the fiber cement boards market in India. And then we did an analysis on the rain screen cladding market in Germany. So we did an analysis on the non-woven PPE industry in the US. So those are kind of niche industry areas or sectors that clients typically come to us for deep dives into. And this would include looking at the trends within the industry, looking at the competitive landscape, who are the major players in the industry, looking at the future outlook of the industry, looking at the drivers of the industry, deploying specific frameworks like porters or a structure conduct performance model or a SWOT, etc. for the industry, and then the future outlook in terms of what's the analyst opinion about or the analyst coverage for the industry.
So a client would be typically thinking about investing in the sector or just trying to understand it, and they would come to you and say, hey, I'm interested in the protective personal equipment sector in the United States, do an industry analysis for me.
Absolutely. So typically the client's objective here would be, as you said, to sort of extend their market into a newer geography and understand the industry in that particular geography. For example, within the industry, he could have a geo focus, right? The client could also be looking at acquiring some players in that industry for inorganic growth. The objectives could be multiple.
Great. Economic research. Tell me an example there. What's happening in the industry? Do you sort of have a menu of things that the client would choose from, or do they just get everything? Like, would some clients say, hey, I really care about executive movements and new products, and someone else might say, I really care about new sites that they've opened up or new store locations, or, they might sort of have specific requests?
Sure. So the research and intelligence services that we deliver are totally customized. We call it custom research. That is where we are different from the syndicated research providers like the data monitors of the world, where we provide custom research services or custom intelligence to solve your particular business problems. So in case of competitive intelligence, or in another service offering called key account management, which is again continuous ongoing exercise of opportunities mapping in your key accounts, how to maximize your sort of share in your key accounts. In these two services, it's a continuous ongoing exercise where it is totally customizable. The client comes to us saying that, hey, here are our top 5 competitors or top 5 key accounts who we want you to track on an annual basis for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parameters. It could be executive movements, it could be new product development, it could be their expansion strategy, it could be their overall growth strategy or the geo strategy that they're looking at. There could be any number of parameters, and we, in agreement with the client, in fact, we also at times advise the client that, hey, this company, this particular parameter would be very important to watch out for. And then in agreement with the client in a discussion, we freeze on those parameters to be tracked across the year.
A few questions on that. I'm curious on the how as well. So executive movements, how do you practically do that? Is it like based on press releases, or do you sort of monitor LinkedIn or monitor their website to look at what executives are listed? So how would you do executive movements?
Sure. So as you said, the first couple of sources that instantly come to mind as far as executive movements are concerned are the usual press releases, the company press room, the company websites, the LinkedIns and the other social media. But besides that, we also do a deeper dive with sources like corporate affiliation, Zoom Info, Zing, Opportunity. I could go on and on and on. So the executive movement, the analyst team is adept at handling some n number of information sources from where they sniff out who's going where, who's doing what, and they also sort of capture the rumored stage before the executive is moving.
Wow.
We can say that, hey, in the next couple of months, this guy is going to move from here, and here are the potential places he may join.
Wow. What about new product development? How do you kind of track that on an ongoing basis?
So new product development on an ongoing basis, there's a lot of R&D that is published around a new product being developed. Especially this is true for the pharma sector, where we look at the drug pipeline, right from the drug discovery stage and so on and so forth, where these firms typically want us to track the entire drug development pipeline from generic to the final stage 1, 2, 3, and we track that using various sources, these clinical development sources and the pharma journals and associations, and we deliver this information to the client.
Awesome. Let's talk about key account management. How's that different, and can you give us an example there?
Sure. Quick example: a large European telecom giant looking at 20 of their key accounts, the Pareto principle, 20 of those guys delivering 80% of their business, came to us saying that, hey, we want to grow our share in these 20 accounts. We want to grow that business and we want to capture a larger pie from those 20 accounts. So the kind of intelligence delivered, the key account management, it involved not just executive movement, but it involved identifying influencers and decision makers along with the executives and the different roles that they were doing. For this kind of an opportunity, here is an influencer and here is a decision maker. So here is the circle of people you should be talking to: the sales guy, the account manager. You should be talking to not just the guy directly responsible for it, but the overall decision maker up the chain, as well as influencers for that particular deal.
Wow, that's amazing. How in the world would you identify from the outside who are the influencers at one of their key accounts?
Sure. So again, that's a deeper dive into the organization structure. Who's doing who's reporting to what are the roles. So there could be a SPOC for the account manager, but then the SPOC's universe from LinkedIn, from the company website, from the forums that he's participating in, from what he's talking about, who are the leading people in the company talking about the same topic. Those are the kind of places where you can sniff out the influencers and decision makers.
And when you say talking about where? At conferences, on Twitter, like what?
Absolutely. So these could be the various social media platforms. These could be these conferences and seminars and company offsites, investor meets, etc. Those are the kind of sort of places where our analysts scout that information from.
Wow. How would they even know who's going to meet with, like, the investor meetings, or who's going to what conference? How would you know that?
So typically, in case of key accounts, these key accounts would typically be large accounts. These typically would be large companies. They typically would be having all their company filings, their quarterly earning reports, their investor presentations, their investor meets, and everything publicly available. That's the place to begin with. And then the analysts take the keywords and leads out of there, and then they do deeper dives within information sources and within deeper generic searches to call out that information.
Wow. So it's really kind of more for the serving a sales force and helping them get much better information about their customers.
Absolutely.
So you can figure out where the opportunities might be to grow.
Absolutely. And while you mentioned Salesforce, a beauty of the key account management program is that the information that you provide to the sales folks can be automated and integrated into their CRM systems.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So a CRM system is as good as the information, the input that the sales guys put into it. But we, as a backup for these sales guys, we sort of directly feed in this information. We can automate and integrate it into their CRM systems.
Wow. Awesome. Let's go actually to strategy support. So give me an example of strategy support.
So strategy support could typically be these detailed market studies, including demand and supply analyses, including regulations, the competitive scenario in the market. These could be strategic assessments, including gap analyses, including these surveys and scans of what's happening as far as the firm is concerned in a particular market, in a particular geography. And then there would be a lot of investment decision support, for example, going the firm's way as to, hey, if you're looking at investing in XYZ companies in this particular sector, in this particular geo. Here's what you should look out for.
That's amazing. You mentioned like supply and demand analysis. Can you give us some industry example that you've done? Maybe it's sanitized, but like analyzing what the supply is in a given industry and what the demand is.
Sure. So, interestingly, last year, we did an assignment for a leading British law firm where they were looking at a newer concept for them and for the industry, which was contract legal market, where they were looking at hiring lawyers on contract basis, reducing costs, and they were exploring this market in 6 geographies globally. So that's typically where they were trying to analyze the demand and supply scenario as to what is happening in these 6 countries, what is happening in the law firm community in these countries, what is the demand for contract legal services, are they actually players who are supplying those services there in those markets, and what's the overall scene as far as the law firm or the legal advisory industry or market is concerned in that particular country.
Are you doing most of this work with secondary sources, the databases that you mentioned that you subscribe to, and other searches online, or how much of the work would be, interviews with industry experts or potentially surveys?
That's an interesting point that you brought up. So our USP is we augment the secondary research. Yes, largely it is secondary research, but we augment it by primary and by adding expert opinion. So it's not just plain vanilla research services offered to the client. It is a comprehensive deliverable to the client solving his particular business problem with the help of secondary, plus the buck stops somewhere as far as secondary is concerned. You can only dig as much as the information available on the public domain, even on the proprietary domain. But then there are some nuggets that you need to pull out from primary. So we go as far as we can with secondary, but in most of our reports, we need to do some primary research as well. We need to talk to folks who are experts in the industry. And then for this, we also have at Enroute a panel of experts. So we have empaneled experts across sectors who advise us on that particular sector, on that particular market for which we are doing the report, and we provide their expert opinion into the client deliverable as well.
Cool. And quantitative analysis. So tell me about that a little bit.
Sure. So that's largely analytics, where we do a lot of predictive analytics, we do a lot of forecasting, we do a lot of segmentation for companies, that what are my target segments as far as my customers are concerned. We do that.
Give me an example of that to make it real. So pick an industry, pick some kind of segmentation analysis.
Sure. So the industry being IT, software, segmentation and analytics would be year on year, when the company, a large IT corporate, a global IT major, they are doing their segmentation exercise. That is, they are bucketing their clients into these segments. Here are my enterprise clients, which are the large corporates. Here are my SMB clients, which are small and medium businesses. And here are my institutional clients, which are my government sort of institutions and organizations. So last year, across these 3 segments, this was the bifurcation of my sales, my revenues, my costs, blah, blah, blah. I need to up or change those numbers to X%. How should I distribute those clients now in these 3 buckets? Which bucket should I grow? Which bucket should I focus on? All that is part of the segmentation analysis that we do for clients.
Great. And then to close it off, you also have PowerPoint support. So like the McKinsey model, and what some firms do is you just do the hand-drawn picture and say, kind of take a scan of that, or you have an existing chart and you can hand draw on it, do this. Is that kind of what you do? Or do you also just create charts from scratch from a verbal description, or how do you go? What kind of graphic presentation support do you provide?
Sure. So just to give you a quick example, A client called early in the morning. This is a UK client. That, hey, I'm getting on a flight to Switzerland to meet this pharma major. And last night in a call, here is what he sort of gave to me on the call. Here are the pointers that I have scribbled on my notepad. I have scanned it and sent it to you by mail, converted into a nice looking, snazzy PowerPoint document for the client meeting. 4 hours while he was on the flight, we turned around the deliverable, the bullet scribbled notes converted into a nice looking 12-pager PowerPoint document with snazzy graphics and some dynamic content.
You're making me scared here, man. That like you're totally gonna all my work here is gonna be offshored to you guys. So that sounds pretty amazing. I would like to be able to do that. Okay, so that's fantastic. So we kind of went around the horn, and there's some more pages here, and we're gonna put this online, right? So
sure.
On the show notes, you can download this capabilities document of Enroute. And now I wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive, and we're going to talk about the process that you go through. And I think we can make this one available too, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So this document will be available in the show notes. There'll be a link to download it. This is for a target screening process that you might do either for looking for an acquisition or for a partner in a space. And it kind of walks through the methodology. So let's start with step 1 and 2. You have a page in here called Creating the Universe. Describe this page for me and what we're doing on these 2 steps of the 7-step process.
Sure. So this is a fairly simplistic process. Looks kind of complex, but we have sort of simplified it, where we are looking at this target screening exercise for companies looking at acquiring smaller players in a particular geography or partnering with the smaller players. So for example, a large IT major partnering with these small system integrators in a particular geography to sort of augment their capabilities. Or it could be a large restaurant chain looking at acquiring smaller players in a newer geography where they want to expand.
Sure.
So for that, we typically follow a 7-step process, which involves largely creating a universe of these smaller entities in that particular geography. How do we do that? So the analysts scan through various information sources local to that particular geography to come out with larger universe of players in that particular industry or in that particular business.
Yeah, and I'll just describe this slide here a little bit. So listener, you can download this and check it out yourself, but we have a nice page that is set up that where you'd say, okay, serial number, name of the company, financials, the number or the growth rate, the footprint, like what's the geography, the amount spent by customers on their most recent ordered items, and then a couple other specific categories for that specific one. So you'd pull together like a spreadsheet basically of here's all the companies that we could find.
Yes, so it's basically a universe of those companies, and when we sort of capture the information, we capture it along some particular parameters, basic parameters like the ones you just mentioned.
And what are, I guess you mentioned some of them already, like Dun & Bradstreet, Hoover's, just searching on the internet, but what would some other tools be that you use to find this kind of information?
So the common tools that you just mentioned would involve the Dun & Bradstreets, the Hoovers, the Aventions, the OneSources, etc. But just to give you specifics, so for a European company, we were once looking at Chinese players. We were developing a universe of Chinese players, which was a tough exercise. But for that, we went into a database called Bureau Van Dijk, which is a European database. But then Bureau Van Dijk or Orbis, within itself, it had acquired a smaller entity in China called Xing. So the Xing database had information of 300,000 Chinese companies.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, cool. Because sometimes you can find the company names, but then getting like how many locations do they have, or more specific, it really takes a lot of digging. So so you identify the universe, and then let's go to slide 3. So we have here this beautiful kind of color-coded slide with basically the same information filled in, but now for each category, for each column, there's sort of red, yellow, green, orange to show which ones are like the most attractive, right?
Sure. So that's a heat map for our client, wherein he can see from basically the red, amber, and green. So he can see that which particular parameter for which particular company is more important, and that helps us or enables us to rank the grid of those companies in order of importance for the client. That's what's done here.
Great. So you do this big heat map, and then you can also do, I guess, Harvey balls, moon balls. And then step 4, so we have a bit of a kind of a funnel here. So talk to me about this, a shortlisted.
Sure. So once we sort of develop that grid in the heat map analysis or the Harvey ball or moon chart analysis, after that, there is this funnel approach where all the shortlisted companies from the larger set of universe are put into this funnel where it is identified that, hey, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parameters are of the most critical importance to the client, and which are the companies or which are the particular outcome of that heat map or that Harvey ball ranked players who are fitting into this funnel in the top and the next and the next and the next layer, finally zeroing down those shortlisted companies into 2 or 3 more relevant ones.
Great. And then step 5 would be you develop individual company snapshots, sort of one-pagers on each one of the shortlisted companies.
So the next step involves the shortlist arrived at from the previous funnel analysis. We look at developing these quick company snapshots to give the client more idea and more inputs on what these companies are about. And this snapshot would typically contain some details on the company, like its financials, like its people, the revenues, the number of sort of employees, a quick framework like a SWOT, and the company's products, their business segments, etc., to give the client a next level of detail on those shortlisted companies.
Right. So you get this kind of one-pager with your kind of company overview, core products and services, a SWOT, strategic priorities, mission, maybe financials if it's available. So a one-page kind of quick overview of it. And then let's see what comes next. So that's step 5. And then so now you get like your 10. And then step 6 and 7, then you really start going in and doing a deeper dive on those companies. And you have some example pages in here of what that would look like.
At this stage, this deeper dive is we're now looking at the final 2, 3, 4 most relevant targets for our client now. And these deeper dives would include larger bits on their org structure, their operating model, what are their USPs, core strengths, competencies, etc., for the client to take a final view as to, hey, out of these 2, 3, 4, this one or these 2 could be the final targets for me.
So we have a business overview. I mean, this is just an example. I suppose you customize it. We'd have financial news, so kind of drilling into revenue and profit and number of employees, and then the org structure, and then operating model with, like how are they split up and so forth. So really kind of getting into, so for a handful of those companies, you do this deep dive.
Yep.
And what M&A have they done recently? What deals have they done? Like where the locations are, whatever is relevant. So what's the kind of timeline typically to do an exercise like that? Is that sort of a 1 day, 1 week, 1 month? What does that typically look like?
So it depends on the client's specific requirement. An entire target screen exercise as described here, all the steps, if we were to go from step 1 to step 7, could take anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. But then at times the client says that, hey, only give me the larger grid of universe ranked along some basic parameters.
Yeah, I can totally see. I mean, I've definitely done projects where, where we did this work, right? Where this kind of effort would have been hugely helpful to have, someone helping to push this along.
Sure. So as I said, a complete target screen exercise would take anywhere up 2 to 3 months. But at times the client would say, hey, just stop at the one-pager snapshot stage.
Right.
Beyond that, we'll do ourselves. Or just give me the quick universe.
Right.
Or then get me to the final 3-4 major players. And then from there on, I will do myself. So it could be totally customizable.
Very impressive. So, like I said, these 2 documents, we'll have it in the show notes so you can download them and take a look. And then, Nitin, what's the best way for people to contact you? Do you want to give out your website? Do you want to give email address? Whatever contact info you want to provide.
Sure. So it'll be easy if they could, log on to our website, which is enroutellp.com, or they could also reach out to us at info@enroutellp.com, or they could reach out to me at nitin@enroutellp.com, or my colleague Karthik at enroutellp.com.
Great. Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show today. This was awesome. Like, I can totally see how this would be a really useful resource for independent consultants who can take a piece or a chunk of a project and really get your team involved. It's kind of like having a superpower. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.